Hello, folks. My name's Edward Carson, and this is Race Matters, and you're listening to WJOP LP Newburyport, Joppa Radio, 96.3 FM. So we're excited to have you here joining us on Race Matters, and you're in for a real treat as we navigate through the things that we navigate through. A lot of that has to do with tales and stories as we talk about the legacies of race in this country. We talked last week a little bit about what was the problem or what is the problem of the 21st century, and we thought a little bit about that brother W.E.B. Du Bois. Today we're here to talk about New England, particularly to talk about race and slavery in New England. And I'm excited, of course, to introduce my guests on this show, Bill Quigley. Bill, of course, is just is a brilliant intellectual. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to embarrass him just for a little bit here. Bill earned his BA degree in American Studies from Middlebury College, and he earned his master's degree in history from Harvard University. He's also a noted historian, author, writer. His most recently published book is Pure Heart, The Faith of a Father and a Son in the War for a More Perfect Union, and that was published through Kent State University. Bill is joining us here because Bill is one of the major organizers for a symposium that's going to be taking place here in a couple of weeks, and we're excited about that symposium. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to bring Bill into the fold right here for a second just to say hello, Bill. And how you doing, my brother?
Well, thank you, Eddie, for inviting me here tonight. I'm really excited to be here. And this is going to be a wonderful event and a much-needed event, I think, and an exciting event for our community here in Newburyport, greater Newburyport and beyond.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, brother, if we can delve into this, for me, it's interesting thinking about the work that you've done, the work that you have done with the museum of Old Newburyport, and I was excited to be asked to participate and join on that, particularly when we talk about race and slavery in New England Symposium that's going to take place here on October the 11th. When I was growing up, my whole notion of race and slavery only centered in the American South, and the fact that in the American South, that's where the slaves were. Racism existed there. When I looked, and I'm talking about even when I was in grade school, and as I got older and older, I started to learn and figure out a little bit more things, obviously through more readings, through more courses, college, graduate school, even high school. And the idea, of course, that this is a topic for New England. This is a topic for Newburyport that we have to talk about here. Let's start off with this question for you. Can you tell us about the genesis of organizing a symposium on race and slavery in New England?
Well, I have been on the board of directors of the Museum of Old Newbury for a number of years now, maybe 5 or 6 years. And I'm also a colleague of yours at the Governor's Academy in the History Department. And our programs committee, going back 2 years now, thought that it was time for us, given where we are as a country, to reckon with the reality that slavery was a national institution. It didn't last in New England until 1865, but it did last for people who were some people who were enslaved well into the 1820s and 1830s, and I think in some cases into the 1840s. A state like Massachusetts, which had gradual emancipation in its constitution in the 1780s, it provided for people who were enslaved at that time not to be freed until they reached an age of majority, which might be 25 or 28. So slavery persisted for quite a while. And I don't think that that's largely been reckoned with, really, in the sense that people acknowledge it. So it was 2 years ago, actually, Eddie, that right now that we conceived of putting on a day-long symposium. And then COVID interrupted everything. It was supposed to happen in August of 2020. And then we rescheduled it for this past August, and both times COVID interrupted it. So we are just absolutely delighted to be able to realize this on October 11th. It will be at the Governor's Academy. It is sponsored, co-sponsored, co-presented by the museum and governors. And the time is as ripe now for this as it was 2 years ago, if not more so.
You know, Bill, that's an interesting point. When you think about this time being ripe right now, and one of the things that I constantly wrestle with a little bit is the fact that as we get ready for the symposium on race and slavery, you know, a lot of folks are going to learn a lot of things from some noted speakers about things that they haven't really had to think about nor wrestle with. Even folks right here in this area of Newburyport, where we're based, the fact that Newburyport was a contributor to the slave trade. You know, Newburyport sold rum, built ships. You know, most people think about slavery being something in my hometown of Montgomery, Alabama, or Mississippi in the deep South. But yet, as what we're hearing from you and what we know is that this area is also largely responsible for the problems of race and slavery in the past. Can you share a little bit more on that with us?
Well, in terms of, I guess, the ripeness today, how often do we hear that racism isn't a problem anymore? And why do we keep bringing this up? That's making it a problem when it isn't a problem. And speaking personally, I think that is a fallacy, and it's if we don't acknowledge the vexing nature of, first of all, racial slavery, and then racial apartheid in our country for as long as it existed, and we deny it as it has been denied. I'm an historian, as it has been denied in history. We will not make any progress in resolving issues that really are there and that are problematic and that trouble a lot of people in our country, that trouble our country itself.
Can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect to hear from our speakers? Who are some of the speakers who are going to be at the symposium? And a lot of big names, a lot of great folks who are going to be there, maybe some of the topics that they're going to introduce to some folks.
We have 7 historians who will be speaking, and they are so excited to be here. They were on board 2 years ago, really excited to be here. And as you and I know, they are the same group is still on board, and that speaks volumes right there.
Absolutely.
They're excited to be working with each other on this symposium, and they're excited to be here in Newburyport. We have 2 keynote speakers. One of them is Manisha Sinha. She is a professor of history at the University of Connecticut. She is a Frederick Douglass Prize winner for her book, The Slave's Cause, which is a history of abolition. She is actually going to be speaking about the subject of her book in progress right now, which is on Garrison, William Lloyd Garrison, who of course was born in Newburyport and the publisher of The Liberator, based in Boston. Her book focuses on Garrisonianism as part of an international movement that involved women's rights, it involved labor rights, it involved kind of utopian socialism. And she's going to be sharing that subject with us. The other keynote speaker is John Stauffer. He's a professor of American Studies and American Literature at Harvard. And John is going to be talking about a number of abolitionists, black and white, here in New England. Frederick Douglass, James McCune Smith, Garrett Smith, William Cooper Nell, John Brown, Harriet Jacobs, David Walker.
These are a lot of radical folks, too. Folks. I mean, folks who are ready to do a lot of good stuff in terms of ending slavery and everything.
You know, and these are people in the North.
Yes.
Right in the North, who are dealing with opposition right here in the North, not just in the South. He's also going to be presenting, speaking about Charles Sumner, who was the senator from Massachusetts during the Civil War and during Reconstruction. And John is working on a biography of Sumner right now. He's on sabbatical, but he will be here to speak. Gabriel Baumgartner, who just left UNH and is starting this year as an associate professor at Northeastern. Her most recent book was called In Pursuit of Knowledge, was published about a year ago, and it's about the role that Black American women played in the expansion of educational opportunities to all people, not just Black folk, in the 19th century, in the early 20th century. And so she goes back and she, we know about Brown versus Board of Education, et cetera, but she shows how this is a movement that had roots way back in the middle of the 19th and through the late 19th century. Her talk, though, is going to be on Negro Election Day, as it was called, in the 19th and early 20th centuries. No, sorry, the late 18th into the mid-19th century. Here in Essex County, Dr. Baumgartner has been doing a lot of work with a major grant to research slavery here in Essex County. So she is a fount of knowledge about slavery right here. I'm so excited for her talk.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you want me to go on? More speakers?
You know, before you do that real quick, and just thinking about some of the things that you've added so far, it really brings us to this point, though, of us having to wrestle with truth a little bit. And again, the idea is truth is something that's hard for people to understand, especially when it comes to issues of race. And truth kind of escapes people, particularly because they don't know what that looks like if they never heard it before. And it sounds like at the symposium, folks are going to get a lot of truth about things that they may or may not have heard about in their own backyard.
Right. I think people are going to hear some subjects that are talked about that we know about generally, but they're going to hear particularities that are going to be new to them and to me, to us. And what do we do with that? I mean, you raise an interesting question, Eddie. I mean, history is the stories that we choose to tell ourselves about what we think happened in the past. And we need to measure the truth of the stories that we hear and the stories that we tell based upon their grounding in what actually happened, in fact. And we also need to, I think, consider and be really attuned to our viewpoints, our biases. We all have them. We all have our own particular
Not me.
backgrounds.
No. I am not biased in any such way. Everything I say is gospel and truthful. Very clear, extremely objective. But no, go ahead.
You know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. And you're right. And I have a distinctive point of view. Right. I'm a black man from the American South who migrated up to New England with a lot of trepidation and fear about what would it be like moving up here, but yet now having to look back home to the deep South and make sense of all of this in a different capacity too. So that shaped my lens.
Well, think of the pushback around the country, even right here in Massachusetts, for teaching the 1619 Project in schools. 1619 Project was 2 years ago when the New York Times did a series whose purpose was to put Black Americans at the center of the American history. And I'll be the first to say everything in there wasn't true necessarily.
So in what way? And I've read quite a bit of it. So when you say not everything was truth, I'm curious.
There was I think it was about 50 or 60 historians, many of whom are themselves big proponents of raising the focus on the Black American experience.
Right.
But they were critical of some of the essays that were written in the 1619 Project. And I would say to that, okay, so I can point to a lot of traditional histories that have been written and point to the fallacies in those as well. I mean, you show me a history that is completely true, right? And so, again, I think the responsibility we all have is let's hear all sides.
Right.
Let's hear all voices. And then let's decide, right, for ourselves, what do we think is true? What do we think is the closest, the most valid story about what happened in the past?
Do you think the symposium in many ways is going to get people closer to something that they've got to make sense of, or are they going to struggle a little bit for the fact that it's just so new and it's so different?
I think that if the symposium, in my estimation, if it's a success, it is going to make it's going to be provocative.
Yes.
It's going to make people question maybe some of what they thought was true about history, and to think more deeply about it. I think that's what we need. I think that's a good thing to happen. So Allegra Di Allegra Di Bonaventura, who's at Yale, she wrote a book called "For Adam's Sake."
And she's one of the panelists.
She's one of the panelists
at the symposium.
This was a book written in 2013, and it's based on a remarkable diary by a white man in Connecticut in the 17th and 18th centuries, in the 18th and 19th centuries. The date's correct. And largely from his diary, she spins a tale about this family, and they were slave owners. The saga is fascinating and a little bit uncomfortable to read, but it gives you a whole new perspective on a New England farming family, and he was an artisan and a farmer. And the role that slaves played in their family unit.
It's interesting you point that out, because one of the things I wrestle with quite a bit, especially in thinking about New England, is the role and the legacy of white supremacy here, especially in a sense that most people don't know about that history. They don't know about that legacy. The only thing they hear about is, well, there was the situation with busing in Boston, right? Most folks don't know about really some of the early civil rights battles over race. Even Thurgood Marshall had to get involved when we think about some of the early parts of the 20th century. Some of those things are there. If someone, Bill, were to come to you and they would say, when I attend this symposium, what is the one thing I'm going to walk away from that's just going to be, I'm going to be really kind of, I'm going to ponder, I'm going to think about. And I'm catching you off guard here, right? Because we got a lot of different speakers and everything too. And I'm curious to hear that, because I have a thought on that point too. But what might you prophesize that one thing might be?
That is a tough question. What would be I don't think I could speak for everybody and say everyone would have the same takeaway. In my mind's eye, though, being one of the ones who's been planning this, I guess I would say it would give people, perhaps in just one very packed day, without reading all of these books that these people have
right.
written necessarily, a lot to think about when one does put the African American experience central in the story.
And that's interesting you say that, because that's kind of what I think about all the time too. For me, when I think about this type of history, I'm highly critical of it. So, Bill, I don't know if I've shared this with you before or not. I am not a history buff at all. I am not a history buff. I'm a history critic. Some people would say, well, Brother Carson, that just makes you highly pessimistic. And I may be a little pessimistic. I'm hopeful, but I may be a little critical and pessimistic too. But in a sense that I approach things. And when I think about the symposium, I'm going to walk away, I think, really illuminated even more so by that already heightened pessimism that exists. And some people would say, well, brother, I mean, come on, you got to be a little bit more cheerful than that. For me, I see the legacy of the American empire as damaging and problematic. And the reality, of course, is a lot of folks don't want to think about the role race has played historically and a role that race continues to play in this country even today in the 21st century. And until we get into some elements of truths, and even to your point, where we can have interesting conversations and dialogues and feel free to do that, then we're not going to solve any of the problems here today in the 21st century, because we cannot grasp the problems of the past. I'll give you one quick example. The state of Texas this past summer has decided what is going to be the type of civil rights is going to be taught. We're going to make sure we take out some of the voices of black folks that we deem too radical. Even Martin Luther King, for example, some of the things that white folks have to appropriate to make sure that that's okay. And what I'm excited about with the symposium, it's going to be honest and uncensored. And I would say to folks, that's one of the key things people are going to grasp when they leave.
Our country was founded on an ideal, and the ideal is that the proposition that all people are created equal, and that we haven't as a country realized that perfectly doesn't mean that we're unpatriotic. It doesn't mean that we don't love the United States and think the United States is a great country. But to recognize that we haven't, and where we haven't, is important, so that we can become a more perfect union. I mean, that's our generations and my children's generations now responsibility.
So I guess you would say that you're definitely much more of an optimist than I am when we think about the history and the legacy of this country.
I am. Yeah. I see the pushback, but I also see the progress.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, part of that progress, brother, is the fact that we're talking about this, right? In an interracial capacity that's here and everything, too. So tell us a little bit more about some of the other speakers who are going to be there at the symposium.
You might know of James DeWolf Perry, the DeWolf family. There was a film documentary made about 15 years ago, I would say, in which James DeWolf Perry, who's a descendant of the DeWolf family of Rhode Island, that made its fortune in the slave trade. He and another descendant, Katrina Brown, co-produced that film. He will be here to talk about his experience in uncovering the truth about his own ancestors. He's going to talk about why that truth was buried for so long, and why he feels it's important that it see the light. And he is the founder of a center, I think it's in Providence, Rhode Island, called the Tracing Center, which does a lot of education, like we're trying to do with this symposium. So he will be speaking as well. The other one, I think there's two more I haven't mentioned. One is a PhD candidate at Harvard University, and his name is Kedrick Roy. And his talk is, as I understand it, is coming from his dissertation. And it's titled David Walker's Neighbors. David Walker was a black abolitionist who wrote a very strong anti-slavery and radical document. What would you call it? An appeal.
Yes, the appeal. Yes,
the appeal, and I think it was 1829 or something like that. And Kedrick is going to talk about two of his neighbors that he says have not gotten the attention that they deserve. And one is named Hosea Easton, and the other is Mariah Stewart. And that should be a very interesting talk as well.
No, I'm excited about that. Tell us a little bit about the nuts and the bolts of the conference. So, I'm sitting at home here in Newburyport or in the surrounding area, and I'm interested in participating in this symposium that's being hosted at the Governor's Academy in Byfield. How do I do this? How do I participate?
You go onto the Museum of Old Newbury's website, and you'll see under the Events tab and on the homepage information, all the information about this event, the speakers, and how to register for it. There are two options for attendance. One is in person. We have a 200-person limit, and the tickets are selling fast. It's 2 weeks from today. The limit is because of COVID restrictions. We want to be sensible and precautious. We are asking that everybody who attends in person must be vaccinated and must show proof of their vaccination when they register that morning or confirm their registration. You pre-register online. The Academy is requiring masking indoors. You and I teaching there, and all students there, whenever we're indoors, we're wearing masks. We're wearing masks when we teach as well. So visitors to the campus are required to do the same. The other option is to attend virtually, and it's going to start at 8:30 in the morning. And it's going till 5 o'clock that afternoon. There will be breaks, and there will be an hour plus lunch break as well, and lunch will be served at the Academy. There is a fee for in-person attendance, and one may register online for free and make a donation to the museum if you wish.
Oh, those donations, that's always good. And there's going to be a book signing
Yes,
there
there'll
as
be
well.
book signings, yep, by the authors who are there, the historians who have published books. Yep.
Okay, no, that's exciting.
Yes.
So,
I should have mentioned,
go ahead.
There's one other, he will not be there live, he will be there remotely, but John Demos, who was kind of a dean of New England history, I know him best for his book called titled The Unredeemed Captive, which was a big prize winner, Bancroft Prize, etc. A story of one of these Indian captivity narratives. So John is quite knowledgeable about indigenous peoples in New England and the relationships between indigenous people and colonists. John is going to make opening remarks and closing remarks remotely, and will be attending remotely. He has taught many of our speakers. He taught John Stauffer, he taught Manisha Sinha. Manisha Sinha taught Gabriel Baumgartner. So that's one of the reasons why they're kind of excited to all get together.
And John Stauffer taught you.
And John Stauffer taught me. John Stauffer was my thesis advisor, and really took me under his wing to make my thesis, that book, Pure Heart. Yeah.
So you know, as a historian, as a teacher, as a scholar, as an educator, when you think about the importance of this conference and the type of questions that are going to happen, you know, you individually, what makes you so excited about the symposium? For someone as well read, as well versed as you, the fact that you're going to go into this, and again, you've already stated this, right? That you're going to learn a lot of new stuff. But I mean, what is it that excites you the most about this?
Well, talk about a feast. I mean, I'm going to be a glutton there. I mean, just taking it all in. It's going to be a lot to take in. I think some of it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
But that's how we learn too. Boy, Eddie, I don't know how to answer that. To have in one space a group like this, really world-renowned historians, right here in Newburyport, whose interest, their scholarly interest. I mean, Manisha Sinha is working on Garrison right now, right? is here. That's why they're excited to be here. I think it's just an extraordinary opportunity for folks here to check it out.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you brought that up, because essentially this is, I'm not going to say it's a once in a lifetime event, but for the fact that you're having world-renowned academic scholars, people who are essentially talking about our backyard, in our backyard, where people can meet, they can engage, they can interact with them in different ways, they can hear them speak. It's just it's profound, to say the least.
It's unusual. I mean, one of the things I love about Newburyport is the literary festival that it has.
Yes.
And that does much the same thing. So this would be like a literary festival that's focusing on history, and a very particular history, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about the Museum of Old Newbury and their role in this conference? They've partnered with the Governor's Academy in making this happen, and their functionality and everything.
Well, the museum's mission is to really be bring the history of this region, which is an old colonial region, to life for us now. And I'm just privileged to be on the board of directors there. Susan Edwards, who just recently retired this summer as the executive director, was a big force in conceiving of this program. She brought in a number of these speakers. It would not have happened without the museum. This is the museum's program, thanks to the Governor's Academy, to Newburyport Bank, to Eastern Bank and Insurance, to the First Religious Society. There's a number of people who have stepped up and had sponsored this. But it's the Museum of Old Newbury that put this together.
For those folks who are out there and they love history, they're passionate about it, and maybe even folks who may not be, one of the things that I think about with this venue is the fact that you get to be in proximity to so much knowledge, so much idea. And of course, the idea too, that I think about the debate within the scholarly field about race and slavery. One of the things you pointed out, and it's something that I wanted to make sure that I address with you today, is when we think about race and slavery, oftentimes it's black and white. And you mentioned this, I believe you mentioned this with John Demos, but thinking about indigenous people and their role in this area, and for the fact that the symposium is going to transpire on Indigenous Peoples Day.
Correct. Right.
So.
Right. Providential. This was going to happen in August of 2020, and then Providence intervened, and now it's going to happen on October 11th, right? Columbus/Indigenous Peoples
Absolutely.
Day. I think we are primed for something like this now. Very much primed for it. And Eddie Carson is going to be the moderator, folks.
Oh, the Soul Brother is going to have a lot to do. I'm excited. I get to be there front and center just to hear. I get to hear folks' questions, what's going back and forth, what's transpiring, and I may throw in a few things here and there of my own, which I like a little spice in many ways too. Tell me a little bit about, how about students? College students, high school students, young kids. Is this something for them?
I hope so. It's a holiday, so students will not be in school. We are offering a discount for college students who want to attend in person, or even high school students who want to attend in person. So, of course, one of the reasons why we wanted to open it up virtually for free is to encourage anyone who wanted to, and not to have the price tag be a barrier to anybody.
Yes.
So I should point out also that whether you purchase an in-person or a virtual ticket, you would then have access to the recordings, so you can watch them at your leisure. You might have plans that Monday and are unable to attend an event all day long. You could register virtually and have access to the recordings and then watch those at your leisure.
Do you think there'll be a sequel to this symposium? And I'm not trying to scare you or freak you out here for a little bit, but it's going to be a successful venue. And so people are going to be wanting more and more and more. Has that kind of crept into your mind a little bit?
Well,
a little bit?
I don't know if there'll be I can't predict what would follow like another day-long symposium. 2 weeks later, though, the museum on Thursday the 28th that evening is offering a virtual program by one of the authors of a book on the Zili daguerreotypes. Lisa Barbash is curator of the Peabody Museum at Harvard, where those photographs, those plates were discovered in their attic back in the 1970s. No one knew they were there. And John Stauffer, Manisha Sinha, a number of historians have wrote essays on the Zili daguerreotypes, which were done by a photographer for Louis Agassiz. Louis Agassiz was a social Darwinist biologist who believed that human beings descended from two different origins, not one, to account for racial differences. And he did his field work in the American South, and that's when these photographs were taken of enslaved peoples. He did field work in South America as well. So Lisa Barbash will be speaking, a really nice follow-up, I think, in many ways, to the symposium 2 weeks later.
So we're not short on anything that folks can engage in. I mean, you know, I sit here and I think about this area and I think about the wealth of information. I mean, the history, we're connected to brilliant folks, interesting folks, people who are passionate about histories, particularly in this area here. And you don't even have to go to Cambridge or Boston to find that stuff. I mean, I'm talking about right here in Newburyport. So
that's right. That's right. And that's the museum's mission. And we would love to have a good turnout.
No, I
in
think
person and online.
No, I think that's going to happen. You know, Bill, as we start to bring this to a close here real quick, you know, I just want us to ask you a few questions about yourself, since I have you here and everything too, right? So, a long-time educator, you went to Taft. Am I correct?
I did. The Taft School is a high school.
Yep,
Yeah,
boarding school. Yep.
Yeah.
So you're at Taft, then you made your way to Middlebury, then on to Harvard, and then you have been at the Governor's Academy. You've been there, let me see if I can get this right, 26 years?
This is my 30th.
Dang it. I wanted to be close.
Eddie, I actually was a newspaper reporter way back in the early 80s, right here in Newburyport at the Daily News, from 1980 through 1984. And had a wonderful experience doing that before I got into education.
And you worked at a book publishing firm in Manhattan.
Yes, that was before then. Out of college, I worked for a book publishing house, trade publisher, William Morrow.
I've stalked your bio just a little bit, so I know just a little bit of some of this stuff too.
And my master's didn't come until I was in my mid-50s. I went back to get my master's when my two daughters were, my oldest daughter was off to college and my youngest daughter was just starting high school, and I found myself a little bit more free time, and I said, I'm going to go get my master's in history.
And that experience was quite interesting in terms of the program.
Yeah.
My understanding and everything too.
Yeah.
And in how you end up connecting with John Stauffer, who became your advisor.
Yes.
During that time period.
Yeah.
When you at the Governor's Academy, you have been the history teacher, department chair,
Yep.
dean of faculty,
Dean of faculty,
and academic dean.
And now happily teacher, coach again.
Tennis
coach. Yep.
So one of the things we're going to do, of course, is we're supposed to play against each other.
There we go.
And I'm, I got a lot of ego here, so part of me says I'm ready for this. But really, the real issue here, of course, is I just don't know if I'm going to win, because you play religiously throughout the summer, and I played one time and I fractured my foot this summer, so that'll be problematic in a lot of ways too. Brother, I just wanted to, get a little bit of that information and everything too. So one more time, if folks want to know more about the symposium, how do they learn about this information?
Go to the Museum of Old Newbury website, and right on the homepage, as well as on the events tab, you'll find all the information you need about the event and how to register.
For folks who may have particular questions for Bill Quigley, You can address those questions to me at my email address, which is racematterspodcast@gmail.com. And then I'm assuming if folks wanted to look you up at the Governor's Academy, they can reach out to you. If you've said something of interest to anyone that they just want to follow up with you a little bit more.
Sure, I'd welcome that.
All right. Bill, brother, this has been great. I'm super excited about the symposium. I'm excited to have you here. And, the one thing I'll say briefly as we bring this to an end is, we have to continue to have these conversations about race. We have to think about the problems of the past as predicaments of the future. And we're seeing even here in the 21st century that we're still wrestling with the fact that it's hard for folks to grasp the various narratives that are out there because we do have different points of view. And you pointed that out too. And I'm well aware that I'm biased and I have my viewpoints here too. So folks, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Bill Quigley. I hope you'll make your way to the symposium on October the 11th at the Governor's Academy, starting at 8:30 a.m. Really a great panel that's selected there. A lot of great conversations. Lunch is going to be there, book signings. So I look forward to seeing you around. Thank you so much. This is Race Matters, and it's been great to have you tune in to this show.